Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is your neighborhood-friendly Oxhorn, and this video is all about how to set up and manage your raider settlements for Nuka World, or raider outposts as they're called. As I covered in my video on the evil ending, to get the most out of raider settlements, you really gotta choose the raider ending to Nuka World. Keep the raid bosses alive, go through the entire process, claim 3 settlements, and then just keep going. You get the most rewards from the raider settlement system once you've conquered 8 settlements for the raiders. In that video, I went over the ins and outs of conquering new settlements and subjecting nearby settlements to become vassals to your raider settlement. So I won't cover that here. Instead, we're just going to talk about the mechanics of the raider outpost system. So, the goal of a new raider outpost is to not only generate revenue for you, but to intimidate the nearby other settlements so that it's easier for you to turn them into raider outposts or to enslave them and turn them into vassals that produce food and other resources for your raider gangs. First, you need to build a Nuka World radio transmitter. It looks a lot like a recruitment beacon from the regular settlement system, but it has a different purpose. Instead of recruiting new settlers, it transmits raider radio from Nuka World. Once that's built, exit the workshop, because it doesn't appear in the build menu until you do, and then re-enter the workshop to build the amplifier. You're going to find it right next to the transmitter. It doesn't appear until you build the transmitter, leave the menu, and then re-enter the menu. The amplifier amplifies the radio broadcast from Raider Radio. The whole purpose of this is to strike fear into the hearts of nearby settlements and make them easier to conquer. If you open up the map, you can take a look at this effect by hovering over the icons to unclaimed nearby settlements. And you're going to see when you hover your mouse pointer over it, the icon changes to a half-shackled icon. So over here, this is the icon of a settlement that has been converted into a vassal. You see that it's got chains wrapped around it. This means that the settlers are enslaved, that they're giving resources to the raiders. This one over here is a settlement that hasn't been claimed by you yet, and it hasn't been turned into a vassal yet. Instead, the icon is half-chained, showing you that the radio transmission beacon is working, that these guys at this settlement are going to be easier to convince or defeat because of it. Once your amplifier is up, we need to think a little bit about settlement happiness. Raider outpost happiness is similar to regular settlement happiness, but it works in a different way. Raiders don't like manual labor, so if you assign a raider to a crop, it actually harms your settlement happiness. Instead, the game gives you 2 new build items that improve settlement happiness that are only available to raider outposts. The first is a pick-me-up station, which is a chem dispenser. I like to build this as soon as I can in the settlement, just because all you need to do to start generating happiness is wire electricity to it. That's it. You don't have to assign anyone to it. It works really well. It's also a chem dispenser. Check it out every now and then and you're going to find free chems. Then I build a booze still. You don't have to wire this to electricity, but you do have to assign a settler to it, so it will consume one of your settlers. But as long as a settler is assigned to the booze still, it'll produce booze that you can loot from your workshop, and it generates settlement happiness. So I like to build those 2 things as soon as I acclaim the settlement, so that the happiness isn't harmed too much while I'm trying to figure out the food situation. Which brings us to food, which is a little tricky. Like regular settlements, raider outposts need food. However, raiders can't farm for food because that harms settlement happiness. So the preferred way to get food is to conquer nearby settlements, turn them into vassals, and have those settlements send your raider outposts food. But the way this information is presented to you in the game is really confusing and not intuitive at all. When you go to a raider settlement, even if there's a vassal nearby and you open up the shop window, it's going to say 0 food. That might lead you to believe that there's no food at this settlement, but there actually is. If you go to a settlement and you open up the workshop and it says 0 food but it's red, then that means that it's not getting food. If your food says 0 and it's red, and then you talk to a settler, they're going to complain about not having any food.
Is there anything I need to know about the outpost?
Ain't enough food around. Can't think about nothing else when you got a hole in your tummy.
But if the food says 0 and it's not red, they still complain about not having any food even though they do have food.
Did you need anything?
Well, look, Outpost's nice and all, but you know what would really make this place? More food. Any you got would go a long way.
I know. Really annoying. Also, if you open up the workshop tab in your Pip-Boy, you're going to see an exclamation point next to food for the ones that are suffering from hunger. This means that somewhere along the line, your vassal settlements aren't producing enough food. When you talk to Shank about it, he gives you the impression that you need to make your vassal settlements really close to your raider outposts in order for food to be shared correctly. Now, this is confusing because I've taken a look at my map, and many of my vassal settlements are totally close enough to my raider outposts to give them food. For example, I enslaved the Slog, specifically so that I could get food to Coastal Cottage. The Slog is the closest settlement to Coastal Cottage. There is no other settlement that is close to it. So you'd think that by enslaving that settlement, you'd be good on food at Coastal Cottage, right? But no. Coastal Cottage is one of the ones that gives me an exclamation mark in my workshop Pip-Boy, and the food label is red when I check it out in the workshop builder. It appears that by sacking additional settlements and turning them into slaves, the food they generate doesn't benefit all of the raider outposts. It only benefits the ones that are closest. To test this, I wanted to sack Finch Farm. So I went to Shank, but Finch Farm and Grey Garden were grayed out. I couldn't turn them into vassals, and I didn't know why. But I had a hunch. Now, this was on my Brotherhood of Steel character where I had never done any of the beginning quests. I just tried to whip through the storyline as early as possible. So I never completed the quests at Finch Farm or Grey Garden. So I went to Finch Farm, talked with Abraham, got the quest, went to the Saugus Ironworks, killed the guy, came back, completed the quest, then went back to Shank, and lo and behold, Finch Farm was available. I was then able to go subjugate Finch Farm.
Hey, you're gonna give me and my gangs back in Nuka World everything we ask for. Got it?
Yeah, sure. You'll get all your supplies, all right? Jesus.
It's the same with Grey Garden. Grey Garden was grayed out. I could not subjugate it. But I went and talked to the handy robots, got the quest, cleared out the Mirelurks, turned on the pump, came back, completed the quest, went back to Shank, and Grey Garden was available. I could now turn it into a vassal. But even after doing these two things, Coastal Cottage still had red food. So even though I added 2 more settlements producing food to my network, it didn't help this particular settlement. So it really does have to deal with how close a vassal settlement is to your raider outpost, but also how productive that vassal settlement is. The Slog is not an overly productive settlement. It only has 3 or 4 farmers generating a little bit of food, and it has to spread that food around between all of my nearby raider outposts. So the size of the vassal settlement does matter. Ideally, if you were to do this the right way, you would claim a settlement for the Minutemen, build it up so that it's producing a lot of resources, and then sack it and turn it into a vassal settlement so that it's producing a lot of food for your nearby settlements. If you just sack the settlement as you find it in the game, it's just not going to be producing much.
What just happened? You messed with me. I don't see anything. I think we're okay.
So that leaves us with the problem. Once a settlement is sacked and turned into a vassal, you can't access the workshop. So you can't build it to make it stronger, and there's a set limit of settlements that you can turn into vassals. Shank gives you a lot of settlements that you can go ahead and conquer for the raiders, but he only gives you 5, maybe 6 settlements that you can turn into vassals. Once you get them all, he says there's no more.
Rally some bodies. We're gonna beat a settlement into supplying us.
Actually, doesn't look like there are any targets available for that job at the moment. Might need to do some prep work before we can run it again.
It's kind of a cryptic response, and I don't know what it means. Does it mean that there are others out there that I just haven't unlocked yet? Or does it mean that that's it, and I can't find any more? To test this, I went and discovered a few settlements to see if once discovered, they would pop up as available options to subjugate. Here I am trying this on Murkwater construction site. I ran south until I discovered it, killed the Mirelurk Queen, but I didn't touch the workshop because I didn't want to own it. I then went back to Shank, and even though I could take it as a raider gang outpost, I could not subjugate it as a vassal settlement.
That one's not going to work. No targets.
So it looks like there are just a handful of pre-chosen ones that Bethesda wants you to turn into vassals. So if there's a set limit to vassal settlements, and once they're vassals, you can't open up the workshop and build on them, and your raider gang outpost isn't getting enough food, and you can't assign raiders to farm because it'll harm settlement happiness, what are our options? Well, you have two options. Option number one is kill all the settlers in one of the vassal settlements. Turn it back into a regular unclaimed settlement. Claim it for the Minutemen, rebuild the settlement, give it a high population producing a whole lot of food, then re-subjugate it and turn it into a vassal settlement and hope that that's enough to keep your settlers happy. Or buy the Automatron DLC, build some robots, and make them farmers. This option, of course, is much easier. The drawback is that robots drag down settlement happiness. The way it works is that every settler in the game has a happiness limit. Human settlers are limited to 100 happiness each. They usually average in around 80 if they've all got beds, they've all got food, they've all got water, they've got plenty of defense, so on and so forth. But robots are capped at 50. Even if all of the other metrics in the settlement are perfect, a robot cannot get happier than 50 happiness. Now, the overall settlement happiness is averaged. So if you have a whole lot of robots and only a few humans, that drags down the average happiness of the settlement. So bear that in mind when creating robots to farm for your raider gang outposts. Create as few robots as possible to get the job done. Each robot can generate 6 food max. If you only have 6 raiders at the outpost, then you only need 1 robot. But as soon as you get 7 raiders, you're going to need another robot. The vassal system complicates things so that you may not need 2 robots, or you may need more than 2 robots. So what I would do is if your food is in the red, and you can't conquer any more settlements to turn them into vassals, build 1 robot, assign it to 6 food, and see if that brings it into the blue. If it doesn't, you may need to build another one. Now we know that using a robot to farm is going to reduce your settlement happiness a little bit due to the fact that a robot's happiness is capped at 50. What we don't know, because it's still early days, is how much farming hampers settler happiness. That is, if you assign a raider to farm, what's the actual happiness penalty? And as of right now, we don't really know. When I experimented in my game, I noticed the penalty, but it wasn't severe. He complains a lot.
Sure as hell didn't join this crew to dig up dirt.
But my happiness didn't go down to the 20s or 30s or anything like that. It was fairly comparable to the happiness penalty I got by building a robot, which may make robots useless. You may get the exact same happiness penalty by simply assigning a raider to farm, if that's what you want to do. So it's really your call. You can build a robot to avoid the happiness penalty from assigning a raider, or you can assign a raider to farm to avoid the happiness penalty from having a robot. And then just build a bunch of happiness-generating resources to compensate for it. Now, Raider Gang Outpost happiness is also affected by water, but the nice thing about water is you don't have to actually assign any of your settlers to the water. So just build 1 water for every raider that you have in your settlement. You can use the powered pumps from Wasteland Workshop or the regular manual pumps from the vanilla game. They both work fine. Remember that beds also affect raider happiness. You have to have 1 bed for every raider in your settlement, and those beds have to be undercover. If they're out in the open, then the happiness generated by that bed is actually cut in half. I've tested this in previous videos, and to get the full happiness benefit from having a bed, it just has to be under a roof. The building it's in doesn't need to have walls. So just make sure that there's a roof over your beds, and you're good to go. The final thing you need to think about in terms of Raider Outpost happiness is defense. You need to have at least 1 defense for every raider in your outpost. Now, for the longest time, back in the early days of Fallout 4, people said that you had to have your food plus water in terms of defense. So if you had 30 food and 30 water, you would need 60 defense. That's a great rule of thumb to follow, but technically it's not accurate. Based on the game code, you only need 1 defense per settler to get your maximum happiness benefit. But I still highly encourage you to get way more defense than that, because 1 defense per settler is not enough to actually win an attack from enemies. In fact, a lot of data that's coming out now that Nuka World has been released is showing that you need 150 defense or more to always win a settlement attack, even if you don't show up. I can't confirm that, it's just a rumor. I've had some problems trying to test that in my own game, but that's what the decompiled code says, and so I'm just going to share it with you here. At the end of each day, each raider outpost generates 20 caps and sends it to your trunk at Fizztop Mountain. 20 caps is not a lot, especially when you consider the fact that regular settlements can generate a maximum of 50 caps per day. Now, in order to get a regular settlement to do that, you have to build a lot of shops. If you want to calculate how many shops you need to build to generate 50 caps per day per settlement, check out my settlement happiness calculator, which is in the description of this video. It's a free calculator on Google Docs that I made just for you. But once you start subjugating the Commonwealth and turning settlements into vassals, each of those vassals will send caps to Fizztop Mountain as well. Every 24 hours or so, you get a big message that says 2 things. 1, that your Raider Gang outposts and vassal settlements have sent caps to Fizztop Mountain. And 2, that your vassal subjugated settlements have sent food and provisions to all of your other Raider Gang outposts. Over time, this begins to add up. We haven't decompiled the code yet, so I can't give you exact numbers, but I'll just share with you some of my anecdotal experiences. After turning 8 settlements into Raider Gang outposts, and after subjugating about 5 or 6 other settlements, my chest in Fizztop Mountain was generating about 700 caps a day. That's not half bad. And remember that that's added to the amount of caps that each settlement can generate on its own using shops. That's right, the Raider Gang outposts come with their own brand of shops called dealers. It comes with 2 dealer stalls that you recognize, weapons and armor, and 4 that are new. Booze, chems, gear, and outfitter. Booze is basically a bar/restaurant. Chems is basically a clinic. Gear sells some weapons and gear, some of which is unique to the faction that you're dealing with. So a pack will sell pack gear, an operator will sell operator gear, and an outfitter is basically a clothing store. It just sells a variety of clothing. Each of these will generate caps, but 4 of them also generate happiness. The booze joint, the chems dealer, the gear dealer, and the outfit dealer. So if you're trying to get the best bang for your buck, if you want to generate more caps and get more settlement happiness, you may want to go with one of these dealer stalls. Just like with regular settlement shops, the dealer stalls will generate caps every day and deposit it into the workbench. The frustrating thing about the regular settlement system is that to benefit from all of the shops you have in your settlements, you do have to visit each of those settlements to collect the caps generated by it. And the same is true for these raider outposts. Any caps generated by a dealer stall get deposited in the workbench instead of being sent to your chest at Fizztop Mountain, which is really annoying. I wish Bethesda would come out with a new settlement build option that, like the chest at Fizztop Mountain, served as a central collection point for all of the resources that your settlements are generating. Workshops don't work that way. You can't loot one workshop and have access to all of the caps, resources, and scrap that has been generated in all of the others. Now, those resources are shared in the settlement build menu. When you're actually building with things, those resources are shared. But I can't open up my workshop, look for caps, and loot all of them from every single settlement. That's not the way it works. So that's a definite benefit to going with raiders instead of the Minutemen. Those outposts generate more caps on top of the caps that can be generated by dealer stalls. Now, if you claim a raider outpost, you break its supply line. So let's say that you've already claimed 3 or 4 of these different settlements and you've got a Minuteman provisioner going to each one. If you claim it for the raiders, that breaks the supply line and removes it from the pool of Minuteman settlements that you have, which of course makes sense because it's no longer allied with the Minutemen. So just bear in mind that if you turn a Minuteman settlement into a raider outpost, you'll no longer have access to any of the scrap in that settlement's workbench when using the workbench building system in other settlements. But let's say you get 2 or 3 different gang outposts going, As you start getting more gang outposts, you're going to notice that your overall resources in the settlement build menu increase. That's because there's an invisible supply system that's already in place for every single raider outpost that you get. This means that you don't have to make supply lines. They're already done for you. Now, they are invisible. If you go to the map and press C, you see all your Minuteman supply lines on the map, connecting all of the different settlements. But you don't see any lines connecting your raider settlements, and currently there's no way to see that. You also can't assign any of your raiders to be provisioners. There's just no function for that in the game. However, you can assign robots to be provisioners, but you can only send robot provisioners to non-raider outposts. Notice here that my options include Vault 88 and Covenant, but they don't include any of my other raider settlements that I've showed off in this video. You can only send robots as provisioners to non-raider settlements. This is still really useful if you've got a lot of resources at another settlement that you need access to in the workshop build menu of one of your raider settlements. For example, you can see that I've got 707 steel and 983 aluminum in this settlement connected to the other raider outposts. But as soon as I assign this provisioner to Vault 88, where I have a lot more resources, notice I now have 4,311 steel and 1,095 aluminum in my build menu. It does work. In this way, you can connect the workshops of your raider settlements to your non-raider settlements so that everything shares resources. The raider outposts all share resources automatically, but with supply lines, you can share them with all of your others as well. Now let's say that you're really fed up with this whole vassal settlement system because your settlers complain about food anyway no matter what you do. Some of your settlements are always in the red and it's just not making sense to you, and you'd rather use the robot method of generating food. Well, if you really want to, you can go ahead and sack some of those vassal settlements and turn them into raider outposts. Just go back to Shank and let him know what you want to do. He'll warn you, of course.
Boss? That's one of the places providing us with supplies. You sure you want to target them?
But you still have the option to go forward with it.
Give us no choice.
Like vassal settlements, some raider gang outposts aren't available in the list. But unlike vassal settlements, they're not grayed out. Warwick Homestead, for example. I tried to claim the Warwick Homestead, but Shank said no.
Let me... no go with that one, boss.
I figured there must be some quest there that I hadn't done, and sure enough, I show up and Roger Warwick wants me to go and clear out some super mutants.
I know it's a lot to ask, but if you put an end to them, we'll all sleep a little easier.
I finished it, went back to Shank, and it was still a no-go.
No go with that one, boss. You want...
I even tried wiping out the settlement. I killed them all, including Roger Warwick, but I couldn't kill his wife, who is set to Essential for some reason. Went back, and still no-go. Now, I know there's an important Institute quest with this settlement, but I killed the Institute in this playthrough. They no longer exist, so I can't think of a reason why this settlement is doing this. You would think Bethesda would just remove the settlement from the list if you can't take it over, or gray it out. Distance has nothing to do with it, because I was able to take Murkwater Construction Site, which is even further south than the Warwick Homestead, and farther away from every other raider outpost that I have. So I currently don't know why some settlements are blocked and others are not. I have a hunch that it's because June and Wally are essential characters, and they can't be killed. They also can't be moved. After completing the quest, I got access to the settlement, and I opened up the workshop mode to move them to another settlement to test this, and I couldn't move them. I bet you if you're having a hard time taking over a settlement, and it has essential characters living there, either complete a quest that makes them unessential so you can kill them, or if you can, move them, like you can move many of Preston's friends who head to Sanctuary at the beginning of the game. Once you claim 8 raider outposts, you earn Wasteland Warlord rank number 3. This allows you to craft a tribute chest at every single settlement. To get the tribute chest to work, you have to assign a settler to it. Once assigned, the tribute chest will generate caps and sometimes a legendary item every 5 days. However, once you loot a legendary item from the chest, you have to wait 30 in-game days for it to generate a new one. Since you can place one of these at each raider settlement you control, this could potentially be fairly lucrative. Just like with regular settlements, each raider outpost population is capped by your charisma level. The cap is 10 plus your charisma. My Brotherhood of Steel character has a charisma of 1, so each of my settlements is capped at 11 settlers. I have found that raider outposts tend to attract raiders much more quickly than Minutemen settlements attract settlers. I can't explain it, I don't know why. I recommend that you not go for really large raider settlements. Large settlements can bog down scripts that run at each of the settlements, which can lead to settlement glitches and increase the time it takes to assign a raider to a resource, and it increases lag in the settlement. So, now that we've gone over everything, what's the conclusion? What's better, a Minuteman settlement system or the raider settlement system, or a mix of the two? They each have their pros and cons. The biggest detriment to the Minuteman system is that you have to go to every single workbench in every single settlement to loot the caps that your shop generates and to collect any of the resources that you want on your person. Yes, if your Minuteman settlements are connected to each other via supply lines, you can access the resources in all of the workbenches when you're in workshop build mode. But when you simply open up the transfer dialog from within one workbench at a settlement, you only have access to the resources at that settlement. So, to collect all your bottle caps, you do have to physically visit each settlement. Raider outposts make this much easier by sending shipments of caps to your trunk at Fizztop Grill. That said, to get the maximum benefit from the raider outposts, you still have to visit every single raider outpost to loot the tribute chest. Yes, the tribute chest generates a legendary item every 5 to 30 days or so, but that item is no better than any random item you get off of a legendary enemy, and you usually get 3 or 4 of those per gaming session. In my opinion, the legendary item you get from a tribute chest is not that impressive. It doesn't make it or break it for me, especially if you play on survival or very hard. Legendary items drop like candy on very hard mode. So the Raider Outpost system doesn't actually reduce the amount of time you have to spend collecting resources when you have to go and collect all of your tribute chests. Plus, you can't move the trunk at Fizztop Grill to the settlement of your choice, so you gotta go all the way to Nuka World to loot that. But when you're talking about pure caps, the Raider Outposts are definitely the way to go. The Minuteman settlements are limited at generating 50 caps per day. Now, those settlements will store an unlimited amount of caps in the workbench, but they can only generate a maximum of 50 caps per day, which you get after just having a few shops. If you have all 35 settlements, that's a total of 1,750 caps possible per day. Now, I haven't done the math for every single Raider settlement, but based on what I've seen so far, the Raider outposts are much more profitable. The Fizztop Grill chest is already giving me between 700 and 800 caps per day, and I only have 8 outposts and 4 to 5 vassals. In addition, the raiders you assign to dealer shops at the Raider outposts will generate caps too. The downside is that not every settlement can be made a Raider outpost or a vassal, and yet every settlement nearly can be made a Minuteman settlement. You can never turn Bunker Hill or the castle into Raider outposts, for example. If you go with Raider outposts, you also miss out on level 4 vendors. There are a few NPCs, a handful really, 5 or 6 NPCs you can find in the game, that if you recruit to one of your Minuteman settlements, you can turn into a level 4 vendor that sells unique items and has a lot of money that you can use when selling your own stuff too. If you go with the Raider outposts exclusively, then you miss out on that. Also bear in mind that Raider outposts depend on a lot of settlement-specific charisma perks that regular settlements depend upon as well. For example, you can't build any crafting stations at any of your Raider outposts until you get the 2nd level of local leader, which costs 6 charisma and 2 points spent into local leader, one of which can't help you because it's about supply lines. The first point of local leader allows you to open up supply lines within your settlements, which don't work with raiders and only work with robots in those settlements, so it's kind of a bit of a wasted point. And 5 additional ranks into charisma might not be worth it for people who didn't decide to start out doing settlement building and don't need high charisma, like my Brotherhood of Steel character, for example. Cap Collector also works with the new Raider dealers. With Cap Collector, you can invest 500 caps in any Raider shop type, and then all other shop types like that will permanently have 500 more caps in their inventory for you to use when selling your own goods. Which of course helps you make more money faster by selling purified water or ammunition you don't need and other junk. If you're just looking at the money, the best option in my opinion is to have a mix. Some of them are Minuteman settlements, and some of them are Raider settlements, and some of them are vassal settlements. That way, you still get your tribute chest, you still get the money deposited in your trunk at Fizztop Mountain, and you can still build shops at Minuteman-only settlements. Now, that's still a lot of work. You still got to go to each workshop and collect the caps. You still got to check your tribute chest every 5 to 30 days. So if it were me, I wouldn't make this decision based purely on the numbers. I wouldn't make it based on what has the potential to be the most profitable. I would simply make it based on how you're role-playing the game. If you're role-playing an evil Raider character, make them all Raider outposts. Even if the vassals are hard to manage and you can't really see how the food is working, that may fit in with your Raider character better. If you're playing a good Minuteman character, then don't do any of the Raider outposts. Make it a pure Minuteman-only network of settlements. If you're kind of straddling the line between good and bad, maybe you're running a Brotherhood of Steel or an Institute character, have a little bit of both. 3 to 8 Raider settlements so that you can maximize what you get from the DLC, and the rest can be Minuteman settlements. Who knows? The choice is really up to you. The rewards are similar between the two choices. So let's say you've sacked a few settlements, you've turned them into Raider outposts, and you've decided you don't really like the direction this is going. Can you convert Raider settlements back into Minuteman settlements? You absolutely can. However, it means sacrificing the Raider ending to Nuka World. To convert a Raider outpost back into a regular settlement, just enter your settlement and start opening fire. Once you kill all the Raiders in a settlement and take it back, you start Open Season, which is the quest that you get to kill all of the Raider bosses. You also immediately lose all of your other Raider outposts. You get a message one by one that they are no longer allied with you. So really there's no going back. Once you give a settlement over to the Raiders, it's theirs forever until you decide to do the good ending and kill all of the Raiders. If you kill all the Raiders in a settlement and you lose the settlement, you also lose the Raider Resources tab in the build menu. You can no longer build amplifiers, signal beacons, and the unique Raider shops or the tribute chest. No more chem dispenser, no more distillery. But if you have those things already in the settlement before you kill everybody, you can assign regular settlers to those items. And they work. I assigned a regular settler to the gear shop, and the shop worked well. The inventory looked like a trader shop, though. I didn't see any Raider gear. And you can also assign regular settlers to the tribute chest. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this video was useful. Please see my video on the evil ending for a detailed walkthrough on how to claim new settlements for Raiders and how to turn settlements into vassals. I go into it in depth in that video. Also, remember to check out my settlement happiness calculator linked in the description below. That'll give you a lot of great tips when trying to figure out how to mold happiness at your settlements. If you like this video, please subscribe for more content like it. And as always, thank you so much for watching.